The walls of the observation hall shimmered faintly with containment fields. Rows of cadets in varying shades of fur, scales, and skin fidgeted in their seats as the reinforced doors slid shut with a hiss. No one ever felt relaxed during a Predator demonstration, not even the instructors. "Cadets," barked Professor Relith, a towering insectoid with a voice like boots grinding gravel. "The protocols are non-negotiable. Do not make eye contact, not even a glance." The silence was immediate and absolute. The Predator specimen stood behind a double layer of Plaz steel, its breathing shallow but loud enough to carry across the amphitheater. Massive quadrupedal and low to the ground, it looked as though some ancient terrestrial tiger had fused with a Terran Komodo dragon, then been dunked in armor plating. Its hide rippled like liquid basalt, and its eyes, now half-lidded, shone an eerie bioluminescent blue. Jackson Wolf leaned slightly forward in his seat, frowning. The thing didn't look agitated. Yet, 2 Jernathi cadets 2 rows ahead of him whispered bets. 5 glibbits say the chains hold. I'll double that if it actually bites the professor. Both snorted and clicked softly in amusement. Professor Relith continued, gesturing to the beast. This is a Type 4 Carnassian Reaper. Apex predator on a death world classified inviolate under galactic edict. What you are witnessing is one of only 3 known specimens ever brought off-world. Observe the muscle grouping along its flank. That's not hypertrophy, it's layered tension biology. The Carnassian can accelerate to 30 meters per second in under 2 seconds. A ripple of awe and unease passed through the crowd. In addition to advanced olfactory tracking and temperature pulse detection, it is also reactive to gaze fixation. This is critical. Predators on such worlds evolve based on challenge dynamics. A fixed stare is seen not as curiosity, but as provocation. Jackson shifted in his seat. He wasn't nervous, yet, but his heart was ticking up a notch. He'd heard horror stories about Predator demos going wrong, but most were overhyped dorm rumors. The chains around the beast's limbs hissed faintly, adjusting to minor tugs as the animal stirred. Massive muscles flexed. One chain groaned. Someone behind Jackson whispered, "Did it just move?" Professor Relith's antennae twitched. "Remain seated." The Predator opened its eyes fully. The glow intensified. Relith's voice lowered, becoming almost reverent. "Note the dilation. It is recognizing its surroundings. Now, observe." A high-pitched metal shriek cracked the air. A chain snapped. Gasps and shrieks erupted. Cadets bolted upright. The Predator twisted its bulk, yanking the second chain. Another shriek, another break. "Containment failure," blared the alarm. Emergency barriers began slamming down over exits, but slowly, painfully slowly. Some were already jammed halfway. Chaos. The Carnassian leapt off its platform with terrifying speed. A panic wave swept the amphitheater. A scaled Threlly cadet screamed as he was knocked off his feet. Another cadet, a squat, armored Vexti, slammed into a wall trying to flee, slumping to the ground, limp. Several others dove behind the observation consoles. Jackson didn't move. He didn't know why. He didn't think. 1 second he'd been sitting, the next he was on his feet, staring straight at the beast charging toward him. It roared. Time slowed. He felt the sound vibrate in his ribs. The Predator bounded across the floor, claws gouging streaks in the reinforced paneling. The air stank of scorched ozone and fear. Jackson's breath caught. He couldn't hear anything else, not the alarms, not the screaming, just the thudding footfalls and that glow in its eyes. It was going to hit him, rip him apart. He knew it. His legs wouldn't move, his knees were locked, his jaw clenched. He didn't blink. The beast stopped. Not skidded, not hesitated, stopped. Less than 2 meters from him. The glowing eyes blinked once, then twice. And then slowly, like a house-sized dog recognizing a master's voice, it lowered its bulk, folded down, curled. Jackson remained frozen. The beast lowered its head. Its breath came slower now. Its claws twitched once and then relaxed. It did not purr, did not growl. It simply rested. Silence fell across the room. No one moved for several long seconds. Then came the trample of boots and clawed feet. Security personnel in shock-hardened suits swarmed in through the malfunctioning barrier doors, stun lances glowing. "Back!" Jackson shouted, louder than he intended. "It's not moving. It's calm." He was shaking now, legs unsteady. He took one half-step back, his heel knocking against the base of the bench behind him. Still, the beast did not stir. Professor Relith appeared, panting, antennae limp. "What? How did—" "Don't touch it," Jackson muttered. "Just wait." Medics rushed to the injured cadets first. The Threlly with the bleeding shoulder was quickly sedated and stretchered out. The Vexty with the blunt trauma was stabilized and moved gently. Someone somewhere was crying. Jackson finally sat down, hard, as if his spine gave out. The Carnassian didn't move. Later, in the medical wing, a bioscan hovered silently over Jackson as a human nurse named Annika reviewed the results. "Your blood pressure's still through the roof. Adrenaline spikes off the charts. You're probably crashing soon." "I already am," he muttered. "Pretty sure I'm vibrating internally." "You didn't even flinch. You should be in a panic spiral right now." "I couldn't move," Jackson said honestly. "My body just froze." Annika peered at him with narrowed eyes. "You're showing early-stage muscle fatigue across your posterior chain, lower back, thighs. Classic tension trauma. I'm giving you 2 days rest, minimum. If you get tremors or vomiting, report immediately. Got it?" He nodded once, weakly. Outside the infirmary window, the academy was buzzing. Inside, a different buzz was building. He used mind tech. "I bet it's a gland," something he excreted. He looked at it like he owned it. He spoke to it in silence. Jackson groaned and rolled onto his side. He had no idea what had just happened, but he was absolutely sure of one thing. Whatever it was, he was going to be hearing about it for the rest of his life. By the next morning, the Academy's Central Forum had been hijacked by a flood of speculation, conspiracy theories, and more than a few poorly drawn caricatures of Jackson Wolfe riding the Carnassian like a horse. Someone had even altered the Academy's crest in one image, replacing the traditional trinary star with a pair of glowing predator eyes and Jackson's squint beneath them. He stared at the bulletin board in the mess hall in mute horror. The gaze of Earth? Really? Sitting across from him, Cadet Tallien, a slender, feathered Uvathi, blinked both sets of eyelids. "It's better than mammalian dominance emission. That one's got a 5-page research thread already." I froze, Tallien. I didn't emit anything. "You didn't blink for almost 10 seconds. "I couldn't. My body shut down." "That doesn't make it sound less dangerous." Jackson buried his face in his hands. He hadn't even eaten half his ration bar. His stomach still hadn't caught up with the last 24 hours. He'd gotten 4 hours of restless sleep before being pulled into a mandatory follow-up scan and psych evaluation. Now, everywhere he walked, cadets paused and whispered. A pair of Negrathi juniors scurried past, doing exaggerated eye contact stunts and falling over in mock submission. This wasn't a fame he'd earned. It was a weird urban legend he'd been accidentally trapped in. Before he could stand, his wrist console vibrated. An official notice appeared in pulsing red. Academic Committee Review Immediate. Location: Admin Hall D7. Subject: Jackson Wolfe, Cadet Level 2, Xenobiology Focus. He groaned again. "Oh, come on." Tallien looked over his shoulder. "Well, this'll be fun." The hearing chamber was colder than it needed to be. Or maybe that was just Jackson's nerves. At the curved table sat 6 figures, 3 biological, 3 mechanical. The biologicals included a broad-shouldered Valaxian with bone-white scales, a Centauri with a facial frill that pulsed faintly when he spoke, and Professor Relith, who looked particularly brittle today. One of the synthetic committee members leaned forward. Its vocalizer buzzed. "Cadet Wolfe, describe what you did between 1,402 and 1,405 hours yesterday during the containment breach." I sat, then stood, then stared at it. "That's it. You chose to make visual contact with a predator specimen undergoing active containment failure?" the Valaxian demanded. "No, I didn't choose." I froze, my legs locked. I couldn't look away. "Interesting," murmured the Centauri. and yet the predator halted within lethal proximity, displayed submission posturing, and has since refused food from any handler not of your species. I'm not a handler. I didn't do anything except not die. A hologram flared to life beside them, showing multiple angles of the moment. Security footage, drone captures, thermal scans, the Carnassian mid-leap, the ripple of its chest. Jackson, rigid as a pylon. The abrupt halt, the curl, the stillness. Even now, Jackson could feel his own legs cramping up just watching it. One of the synths projected a diagnostic overlay of Jackson's vitals during the event. Heart rate spike, cortisol surge, micro tremors in the lower limbs. The timestamp chart practically screamed terror. He's telling the truth, the AI concluded flatly. The Valaxian made a dissatisfied noise. And yet, your species presents a consistent paradox in our behavioral data. Extreme vulnerability coupled with disproportionate survival outcomes. I think we call that luck, Jackson muttered. Professor Relith leaned forward at last. Cadet Wolf, I do not believe you acted with intent, but the results of your reaction are undeniable. Until further notice, you are to be restricted from all live predator demonstrations. He sagged with relief. Gladly. You are also temporarily assigned to Species Behavioral Analysis Subcommittee 5. Wait, what? Relith's antennae twitched. They're compiling observational data on human physiological response cues. You're the new control subject. The Valaxian added with thinly veiled irritation. Also, we must reevaluate all xenopsychology training materials involving Terran species. Congratulations, Cadet. You've triggered a curriculum review. Jackson didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. The days that followed did not improve matters. Within 72 hours, someone had printed "The Eye of Death Sees All" onto 100 pins and distributed them to the entire dorm quadrant. Jackson found one taped to his bunk. He tried to ignore the growing cult of fascination that surrounded him, but it was impossible to walk down a corridor without being asked to demonstrate the look. When he tried explaining that it was not a look, just an involuntary stress response, someone had recorded it and dubbed it over with dramatic music. The worst part? The Carnassian had gone almost completely docile. Its vitals were stable. It had stopped growling. No escape attempts. It even turned its head expectantly toward the enclosure door whenever Jackson walked past during his reassigned observational duties. At one point, during a live behavioral feed, it nosed the boundary glass and lay down facing the camera, watching him. "It remembers you," murmured Professor Ilian, a soft-spoken Centauri biologist, as they reviewed the footage together. "I think it's imprinted." Jackson didn't take his eyes off the screen. "That's not how imprinting works." Ilian lifted a shoulder fin. "I've studied these for 40 years. This is new behavior. It looks calm, not sedated. Just calm. Can we stop saying it's because of me?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." By the end of the week, a minor diplomatic incident erupted when a visiting ambassador's aide, after hearing a distorted version of the event, requested a private gaze tutorial from Jackson in hopes of learning Terran intimidation techniques. The request was denied. Barely. The medics cleared Jackson for full activity again by day 5, though the psych team kept him on a mandatory decompression protocol. He was still getting stress headaches, though less frequent now. His appetite was returning, if slowly. Sleep remained elusive. One night, Tallinn dropped a data slab on his desk. "What's this?" Jackson asked. "Student submissions. Theories about your power." "I don't have a power." "Right. Just skimming them might help. If you can prove enough of them wrong, maybe the buzz will die down." He opened the file. Hypothesis 12. Human ocular dilation mimics a prey beast's counter-predator threat display. Hypothesis 19. Terrans subconsciously secrete stabilizing neuropheromones under stress. Hypothesis 33. The Carnassian recognizes Jackson as an alpha predator due to vocal resonance harmonics. "I don't even know what a resonance harmonic island." Tallinn tapped the bottom of the slab. "My favorite, Terrans share ancestral predation zones with Type 4 Deathworld fauna and have retained ancient cross-species dominance instincts." That's anthropology fiction. Yes, but very popular. Jackson leaned back, rubbed his eyes. He was too tired to be angry, too wired to rest. The truth was, he didn't understand what had happened either. He'd replayed it over and over. He hadn't done anything smart. He hadn't made a tactical decision. He hadn't even thought. He'd just frozen. And the beast had stopped. Whether it was fear, coincidence, or some forgotten evolutionary echo, he didn't know. But now, he was at the center of an academic storm he'd never asked for, surrounded by aliens who either feared him, wanted to study him, or worse, wanted to be like him. All because he hadn't blinked. Jackson's pulse had settled into something resembling normal. Not restful, not calm, but at least it no longer came with a tremor in his hands. The physical symptoms were fading. The rest, not so much. By the second week after the incident, the Academy had updated 5 separate safety protocols. 2 of them included specific clauses about species 5, 8, 1 human, visual interaction thresholds. The wording was vague but clear enough. When humans were present near predator specimens, extra behavioral variables needed to be accounted for. That would have been fine if not for the corollary clause. Subject Class Cadet Wolf to restricted visual exposure environments during xenobeast orientation procedures. I'm not a radiation hazard, Jackson muttered, standing outside Lab Annex 3 as a junior officer in hazard armor sealed the viewing window behind him. Nothing personal, the officer said, trying and failing to keep the amusement out of her voice. Just procedure. You're on the containment complicator list now. I froze in place. I didn't beam dominance into its brain. Still, it curled up like a puppy. Jackson sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Don't say that either. It makes it worse. Across the hallway, 2 cadets watched him from a distance. They didn't speak. They just observed wide-eyed, tense. Jackson gave a half-hearted wave. They fled. Later that day, Professor Ilian summoned him to a closed behavior lab. The glass partitions were dimmed, shielding the interior chamber from the outer viewing room. The Carnassian Reaper was inside, dozing in a kind of coiled crouch. Jackson hesitated before stepping through the decontamination arch. Every muscle in his shoulders pulled tight. You don't have to go in, Ilian said gently. This is voluntary. I want to see it again. Ilian watched him carefully. Why? Jackson glanced at the beast, then back at her. Because I'm tired of being afraid of a thing that curled at my feet. Ilian nodded once. No sudden moves. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, we withdraw. The chamber's entrance hissed open. Jackson stepped through. The Carnassian stirred the moment he crossed the threshold. It didn't leap or growl, just slowly raised its head and turned it toward him. He stopped moving. The 2 locked eyes again. No roar, no charge, no dominance display. The predator stared for a moment longer, then lowered its head back to its paws. Jackson let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. See? Ilian's voice crackled in his earpiece. Recognition. No, Jackson whispered. It's waiting. For what? I wish I knew. It wasn't submission exactly, not anymore. It was more like expectation, as if it thought he would do something next. He didn't. He stayed for 2 minutes, then backed out the way he came. Outside, the murmurs started up again, that he was developing a bond, that maybe he had a neural link, secret Earth tech. Someone even floated the idea that he was a psychic. Jackson made the mistake of laughing at that one. It didn't help. The rumor gained traction. 2 cadets were still recovering from the initial containment breach. The Threlly, with the dislocated shoulder, had been confined to a soft sling for nearly 2 weeks, his fine scales still bruised. The Vexti, meanwhile, had suffered a minor skull fracture from ricocheting into the observation wall. She'd only returned to class after 10 days, and even then with a visible cranial stabilizer. Jackson visited her when he could. She didn't blame him, but others did. Not openly, but he could feel the stares. In one lecture, an irate Zarnathi student challenged the instructor. If humans have unpredictable biological triggers, how can we be expected to trust mixed-species lab assignments? The instructor tried to reframe it as a healthy debate. Jackson sat through the entire session without saying a word. But afterward, the mutterings followed him into the corridor. Instinct cheat. Unfair advantage. He's not dangerous, he's defective. He didn't snap back, didn't explain again, he just kept walking. But by the end of the week, he started requesting solo lab assignments. On day 20, a committee of interspecies scholars arrived from the main planetary hub. Among them was Dr. Halvex Chur, an authority on cross-evolutionary predator-prey signaling. He was tall and spindly, with translucent digits and a voice that hummed at subsonic frequencies. He requested an interview with Jackson. "I don't suppose I can say no," Jackson said when the formal summons arrived. "You could," Talene told him, "but it wouldn't matter. They'll ask your bunkmate next, or your old instructors, or your classmates." Jackson showed up the next morning, spine straight, eyes dry from the sleeping suppressant he'd taken the night before. Dr. Chur's office was ringed with holoscreens, showing various predator species and standoff scenarios. Some ended in bloodshed, others in strangely gentle retreats. "I've reviewed your biometrics during the breach," Chur began, tapping a long finger on a data slate. "Your neurochemical profile is consistent with trauma-induced paralysis. Classic freeze instinct." Jackson nodded. "That's what I said." But the beast interpreted it as a challenge. "No, it interpreted it as something. That doesn't mean it was a challenge." Chur looked intrigued. "You believe it reacted to ambiguity?" Jackson hesitated. "I think it didn't know what I was, and maybe it didn't want to risk it." Chur paused. "And you? What did you think was going to happen?" "I thought I was going to die." Silence stretched between them. "That makes what you did even more statistically abnormal," Chur finally said. Jackson leaned forward. "You know, for a school dedicated to xenobiology, no one seems to understand that humans can be terrified and still stay frozen in place. It wasn't a plan. It was biology misfiring. I just got lucky." Chur's frills rippled with amusement. "Or perhaps your species has cultivated a survival instinct so unorthodox, even apex predators hesitate." Jackson slumped back in the chair. "That's a terrifying thought." Terrifying to them, perhaps. He wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disturbed by that answer. That night, his bunk door slid open with a soft hiss. Talene stepped in, tossed a wrapped packet onto his desk. "What's this?" "Peace offering. From the Gurnathi twins. It's meat-shaped." He raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "They dared each other to stare into your eyes during simulation training. One of them threw up." Jackson covered his face with both hands. "This is getting out of control." Talene sat on the edge of the desk. "You've accidentally become a myth. Myths don't obey lab rules. They spread." "I'm not a myth. I'm a guy who couldn't move his legs." "Exactly. Which is why no one knows what to do with you." Jackson looked toward the window. The moons of Lixin Prime drifted lazily in the atmosphere. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "No one thinks you did. That's what makes it worse. They don't understand you, but they can't dismiss you, either." He didn't respond. He just stared into the dark. In the private research deck, beneath 3 levels of biometric locks, the Carnassian Reaper lay curled in its enclosure. It had stopped eating again. When the lights dimmed, it rose, not to pace, not to threaten, but to sit, facing the observation pane, waiting. 3 weeks after the incident, the Carnassian stopped eating for good. Not due to illness, every scan showed perfect health. Muscle tone, vitals, hydration, all optimal. But the creature refused food from every handler, ignored scent cues, rejected synthetic prey. When a med drone tried to administer a nutrient slurry, it slashed the unit into splinters and returned to its vigil. It was waiting again. The Academy's containment logs recorded it lying in the same position for nearly 47 consecutive hours, eyes fixed on the outer door. Trainers reduced visits to avoid distressing it further. Eventually, reluctantly, a consensus formed. Jackson would need to return to the chamber. He stood outside the door now, flanked by 2 instructors, arms crossed, shoulders tight. "You're not obligated," Professor Alien said softly. "We can transition it into artificial hibernation. It may not survive, but—" "No," Jackson said. "It's not just an animal anymore. It's trying to tell us something." "You believe it's bonded to you?" "I don't know what it's done. But whatever it thinks is happening, it won't let go of it on its own." He stepped forward. They opened the door. The Carnassian didn't move as Jackson entered. No growl, no shift, no flash of dominance. Its massive head tilted once, its breathing quickened. Jackson approached slowly, carefully. "I'm not your handler," he said aloud. "I'm not your alpha, or whatever you think I am. I was just afraid and couldn't move." Still nothing. Just that steady stare. He stopped 2 meters away. "But you're not afraid of me," he said. The creature blinked once. "You think I'm something else?" He sat, not on a stool, just on the floor, cross-legged, level with its gaze. For a long, long moment, the two of them sat in silence. Finally, Jackson leaned forward and whispered, "It's time for you to let go of me. Thanks for watching." The Carnassian lowered its head, exhaled once a soft, huffing sound. Then it turned. Not fast, not aggressive. It walked to the back corner of the enclosure and lay down, facing away. The bond was broken. The official report was 312 pages long. Jackson read none of it. But he was present when they announced the new protocol. No live predator demonstrations involving humans without controlled environmental conditioning. The revised lecture units labeled humans as adaptive unpredictables, categorized separately from standard prey or predator analogs. Several species objected. Most were overruled. 3 research grants were launched to investigate the visual threat response hypothesis in Homo sapiens. Jackson's name appeared on the citation index of all 3. His reaction ranged from disbelief to nausea. But the worst of it, the unshakable, surreal spotlight, finally began to fade. Other stories replaced his. A cadet from RX-4 who hacked the navigation training AI. A Kirathi student who set fire to a lab by improperly dissecting a photothermal fungus. No one stopped whispering about Jackson entirely, but the Academy's attention shifted, and so did his. Talene nudged a small metal badge onto his desk. New nickname, custom minted. Jackson stared at it. It was his face, well, a cartoon of it, eyes wide, eyebrows drawn in sharp concentration. The text below read, "Look him in the eye, at your own risk." "Destroy it," he groaned. Talene laughed. "Already distributed to 3 departments." Jackson picked it up and flicked it into a drawer. "Someday, you'll all forget this happened." "Unlikely. But maybe we'll finally believe you when you say you're not dangerous." "I'm not." "I know. That's why it's so confusing." The Vexty cadet who'd cracked her skull returned to full duty by day 31. Jackson saw her in the mess hall. She approached with a low, even gait, her helmet gone, a faded scar still visible where the stabilizer had been. "I don't blame you," she said before he could speak. "I know, but I'm sorry anyway." She nodded. "You were just a mirror. It saw something in you it didn't want to fight." Jackson exhaled. "Thanks. You'll still be famous forever." "I hate that." "I don't." She left without another word. He didn't visit the Carnassian again. He saw it on the security feeds, sometimes walking now, not pacing. It had resumed eating, it had stopped watching the door. In some way he couldn't explain, he felt released. Final evaluation day arrived. He sat across from the same review board, minus a few observers. This time, no alarms, no incident reports, just a question. "Cadet Wolf," said Professor Relith, "what is your own conclusion about what occurred?" Jackson thought a long time before answering. "I think I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think the predator saw something in me that had nothing to do with courage." "Do you feel this incident changed your understanding of xenobiology?" "Yeah," he said. "I always thought we were the observers. But sometimes, we're part of the experiment too, whether we want to be or not." There were nods. A pause. "You pass," said Relith. Jackson stood, nodded back, and walked out. Weeks later, on a long-range training rotation aboard the Tessel Array, one of the navigation officers stopped him outside the gym bay. "You're the Predator Whisperer, right?" He winced. "Please don't call me that." "Sorry, just curious. Do you actually practice that stare?" Jackson sighed. Then smiled. "No, I just grew up with older siblings." The officer laughed and let him pass. Jackson turned the corner, alone again. No myths, no beast, no stairs. Just a human in space. And for once, that was enough.